Yes, it's Let's Talk Call-In Radio and Radical Radio, getting to the root causes of the important issues of the day. It's an on-air community forum, believes that your voice matters, and welcomes all thoughts and views without judgment, if we can do that. Please join today's conversation by calling 415-663-8492, or you can tweet us at Let's Talk on KWMR. I have the tweet box right in front of me. So, today, your hosts today are Paul Raffel, and Paul Raffel, and Paul Raffel, because apparently Charles is still in bed somewhere, or on his way, perhaps. Yes, let's hope so. When you do call in, please do call in, because it's awfully lonely here. 415-663-8492 or 8317. When you call in, you'll hear a little hissing, buzzy noise as I put you into the system. Just hang on, turn down your radio while you're waiting, and then when you hear me say you're on the air, please give us your first name, and please watch your language. Keep it clean, please. This is the topic today. What are we talking about today? You and I, you listeners and I, are going to think about atheism. And how did this come about? I don't know. I guess there was an article about Mike Pence and, you know, the way things are shaping up. Who knows? Mike Pence might be the president someday, and he is as he says, he's a Christian first, and a conservative second, and a Republican third. So for him, his faith, his belief, trumps, so to speak, everything else. Apparently he's able to sort of subsume some of his beliefs while serving under Senor Trumpel. But anyway, and it occurred to me, and I checked, and there has never been an atheist president. This is a country which prides itself on not having a state religion, in which all religions are welcome. You can believe anything you want to believe, and I've seen it written. I've seen people write about it and say, or not believe anything you don't want to believe, although that is not actually in the Constitution, I don't think. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, cornerstones of American governance, and yet, when it comes to atheism, it's kind of the unspoken subject. It's taboo for a politician to say they're an atheist. I believe there is one atheist representative in the House of Representatives right now. But really, that's the kiss of death. I've seen it this week. Somebody wrote that atheists are less trustworthy or are hated more, disliked more than gays in this country, and, you know, this is...
Who's conducting that
Oh,
poll?
hello.
Yes.
Oh.
You didn't think
Charles
I would arrive,
Schultz is here.
and I revealed myself. You had no faith.
As revealed.
Yes. Well, I mean, yeah, who knows? I mean, religion is a big topic. 663-8492. Call in and tell us what you think. You know, the country is supposed to be secular. There's supposed to be no state religion.
Yeah.
And actually, James Madison was one who was very, very insistent on that. He hated the idea of opening Congress with prayers and all of that kind of thing. Yeah, and it's unfortunate because, well, it's part of the tradition and the culture. And the other extreme, like you could say, take the example of the French Revolution, where they were going to come up with a new religion, come up with a new calendar, try and change the culture in all these ways to separate themselves from the past, did not work. And so it's a funny kind of negotiation that has to go on. But I would think that long term you will see the decline of Christianity, for instance, because ultimately it's a ritual significance and the things, that it's sort of built around are agriculture. It comes out of the sort of tradition of fertility cults in the Middle East. So birth, death, and rebirth, right?
But it's really about. It's interesting that that most religionists in this country, most of the more rigid Christians, are also the ones who want less government, but they want to be able to tell people what to do with their bodies, how to spend their time, who to love, what to... And, I also found an article written by someone who was brought up in what she calls a Christo-fascist commune sort of thing. And this is all part of the grand plan. First of all, it was to have as many children as possible. It's called, let's see, what's it called? Quiverful. There's this movement, the Quiverful movement, which is to have as many Christian children as possible who are homeschooled at fundamentalist sort of communes in groups. Ready to basically take over the country. Mike Pence is all part of this fundamentalist Christian, basically, who won't sit with another woman unless his wife is present, won't be alone with another woman at dinner, for example.
Well, the one politician that won't.
The Billy Graham rule, that was his, also his thing. Billy Graham, who's been the voice in the ear of presidents since Harry Truman.
Yeah, and still with us, Billy.
Still with us.
It's funny. It's a part of. I mean, you can take that back to the Millerite religious sects in the 19th century. That were all predicting the end of the world, and they survive as Seventh-day Adventists today. Those are all offshoots. Yeah. But
when is the world supposed to end?
They keep changing the date. There was a great group in the 50s called the Seekers, and they set the date for the end of the world, and then the world didn't end. And you would think
didn't they record "I Know I'll Never Find Another You"?
Not the Australian pop group that gave us the wonderful Georgie Girl, but it was a religious group in the United States, and you would think that when the end of the world was supposed to happen and it doesn't happen, that this would destroy someone's belief.
Faith.
In fact, the core group, it intensified their belief. So there's something sort of irrational going on here, sort of independent of religion in a way. But it's a very apocalyptic move for everyone in the United States. So it doesn't. I wonder if it isn't part of a larger trend.
Well, so now.
Because there's a history of it, but it's also...
an interesting... there's a book out, One Nation Under God. This was... the link to this was sent by Summer Brennan over in New York City. She sent me this link. One Nation Under God, How Corporate America Invented Christian America. And it says, conventional wisdom holds that America has been a Christian nation since the Founding Fathers. But the author, Kevin M. Cruz, argues that the idea of Christian America is a myth, and a relatively recent one. Back in 1850, apparently, some survey was done. 16% of people back then said that they attended church or had a religion, right? They professed to having a religion. So
I think
in the 30s, along comes Franklin D. Roosevelt and the New Deal, which was anathema to right-wingers and corporations and everyone else.
Father Charles McLaughlin, right?
So, famously. Of course, up they come. The corporations and the conservatives got together with some Christian leaders, including Billy Graham, and started this whole thing about promoting Christianity, creating more Christians, saying that this was a Christian country and we can't allow anyone to, there was all this.
There was a Red Scare
nonsense,
too.
And it came up. It started in the 30s during the New Deal because they wanted to demolish the New Deal and get rid of unions and all that sort of stuff. So it was all about Christian values and you don't fight the government, which is a Christian-led government and all, nonsense. And then, of course, along comes the war, so that kind of put the kibosh on it for a while. But then in the 50s, that is when Eisenhower oversaw this where Under God was put into the Pledge of Allegiance in 53, I believe, and in 54, I think it was, So Help Me God was put into the oath of office, which is, in the Constitution, there is no mention of God in the oath of office. But
What I would see as a long-term trend there is that it's the diminishment of democratic control over the society. That the period from 1850 to 1950, the country becomes much more centralized. The federal government becomes much more powerful. People's identity as citizens no longer makes sense. So just as I say Christianity doesn't make sense in a non-agricultural setting, following the seasons, et cetera, as it does, so too, our democratic ideals, fall away as well as the citizens have less and less real power over, over the government of the country.
right, and so they gather in groups on Sundays, and they proclaim themselves the saved ones, and they hope for apocalypse because what is this life is meaningless because it's the afterlife that's going to be so glorious. So
but think about it in the context
we're supposed to suffer now.
Well, think about it in the context of nuclear paranoia, which affects all aspects of the culture. And so, and the government is saying, hey, butt out, people, we're running the show. And the actual purpose of having any kind of identity as a citizen falls away. And you get, different camps. You get the people who become sort of hedonistic, and you get the people that become fatalistic in a different way, which is that the world is going to end. But actually, as a political force, the right-wing Christians in the United States did not exist as a political force into the 1970s, when Republican organizers very deliberately, using the techniques of the left that they'd observed in the 60s, got the evangelicals and Pentecostals and charismatics and all these people to actually get out and vote, because previously they'd said, well, the government's the devil, don't vote. Right. And now they vote.
They are very good at what they do, these guys.
It's so scary because, it is, I think, very, very, very dark. The Jerry Falwells, the Pat Robertsons, the Billy Graham types, the real snake oil salesmen, and they have now political and financial power built on the control of these churches. So I think it's scary.
So what is the place of atheism in all this? Why would a politician, for example, from let's say California, just because we are what we are, why wouldn't somebody say, okay, look, I don't actually go to church, and I don't actually believe in God, but you can still elect me, can't you? Well, and it would be an interesting test, isn't it? Time for, we have radical Christians, we have radical Muslims, we have radical Jews, the Orthodox,
We have radical atheists, too.
Should there be radical atheists? What is a radical atheist?
Well, I think it would be one I think Christopher Hitchens definitely falls into this category, where he comes out with a book right as the United States wants to bomb the Middle East into nothing, called, Islam is the stupidest religion ever. Now, he would have to understand the impact that coming out with an opinion like that at that time would have. So he says, well, I'm an atheist and this is my view. I think it dovetails too perfectly with American foreign policy.
Right. Well, they're calling the left, the regressive left, are calling this new atheism. It's the nasty atheists. They're not nice.
They're not nice.
Anyway, we have a caller. Hi, caller. You're on the air. What's your name, please?
Good morning. It's MK in Seattle.
Hi.
Hello, my darling. We just saw your lovely daughter. She's milling around somewhere doing something.
I'm so glad you have this topic. I didn't grow up in a religious family. My parents were scientists, just medical people. But I did go to the Unitarian Church every Sunday, and I did wear a hat, and I did do all that stuff. And then when I got to I was back in the 80s, I sort of had a crisis and was trying to figure out what I believed in and how to believe in it. And I was so incredibly fortunate to spend 3 days with Buckminster Fuller. And he was a very smart guy, as you know. And he told me at one point that what he believed in was the integrity of the universe. And that is what I took from that, and that is what I've taken ever since, and I find it very comforting.
Well, he was quite mystical, certainly. I don't know, did he profess any particular religion?
No.
He claimed to have visions. He claimed to have changed his life.
Oh, sure. Yeah, he saw all sorts of great stuff.
Well, so now would he fall into a category of deism, like the founding fathers were deists?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, so he believed there was a creator who just was kind of hands-off. He didn't have to meddle in our affairs. He wasn't actually watching what we do all the time.
Right. Didn't have that big guilt thing.
Because he made the perfect universe. And
popular.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole progression. I mean, you get, by the end of the 1600s, the succeeding generations of Puritans are really not going for this extreme a practice of religion that the Puritans did, and they start branching out in big branches like Congregationalists and ultimately Unitarians. Funny bit of history, actually Yale was founded because a lot of these people thought that Harvard was being taken over by Unitarians, and so it wasn't right-wing enough anymore, so they went and founded their new school down there.
I believe it.
down in
believe it.
But then you get, I mean, like the end point of this is that I think, maybe you retain some of the old Protestant ideals, but no longer any of the religion. So what we call the Protestant ethic or the Protestant work ethic, still very much alive in our culture.
And you're responsible for your own stuff. You're not being jilted or told what to do, and it's not one of those "my God can beat up your God" kind of things, which I see so often in religions, whatever they are. I'm not really sure.
Well, I think, but there's a sort of thing where it's capitalism takes over, right? Where it's your holiness is reflected in the amount of wealth that you have been blessed with or been able to accumulate. So even though those people don't have religion anymore, hard to find very religious people in lots of places in Massachusetts, they still have that religion, which is, having stuff is a sign of God's grace, essentially. They wouldn't put it in those terms.
You're a better person because you managed to be wealthy.
Yeah.
Because you're rich.
Yeah, and actually that is where like a lot of the quote witch burning and stuff came out of. Weak people, older women who were not quote productive any longer, were seen as not just a drain on the community. They were seen as evil in a framework that says that productivity is everything. So if you're not productive on the terms of whatever we want to call it, American capitalism, then you're shunned. And actually, I see that. I see that quite a bit. To this day.
I see that in my life.
It's stunning. There are so many fascinating women. Older women in West Marin, but quite a bit ignored too. I'm surprised.
Want to be ignored.
Yeah, well, there's that. Okay, there's that. There are people who just don't want to be known. But I'm surprised by culture. It's still a youth-obsessed culture, and now
you miss so much. I mean, there's so many great stories and great history that goes along with age, and I love listening to people who are older than I am.
It's fabulous, and young people are idiots. They don't know anything. What would they tell you about, like Nintendo games or out of their trip to a water park? And that's no fun at all.
Right.
So
anyway.
Atheism. Would you like to see politicians come out and say, "I'm an atheist"? I mean, instead of this sort of.
I think that it has to be more clearly defined. For one thing. I mean, there can't be little loopholes, or maybe there always would be. I don't know. I don't like labeling. Labeling is kind of like, okay, I'm in this club, I'm safe, and it sort of got us where we are.
Well, I'd say the way it would function is if this idea of being an atheist did obtain, I can tell you why California politicians don't come out as atheists is because they want to be national politicians. And if you're a national politician,
you have to have a Christian. You have to have a religion of some kind. Doesn't have to be Christian, but.
Right. And so,
it's very sad.
But if atheism became a thing that politicians it worked for them, then all of those kinds of people, frankly, politicians in general, would line up and say, "Yeah, I'm an atheist too," whether they had given it any
you're
thought.
Agnostic, and you're open to suggestions. You're open to learning.
Well, I would just say it's a secular activity, and it is poisonous to the idea of having democratic institutions or having a republic. It's a private concern. So in that sense, I would say I don't care about your religion, nor do I particularly care if you're an atheist in terms of some kind of public discourse. Now, privately, it's interesting to talk to people about religion, but
why does it have a place in the political discourse in a country that has no state religion and sort of prided, let's not say prides, because it prided itself on being a haven for everyone, free thinkers, atheists?
Sure. I mean,
why does it have a place now?
I think the point you make, which is as you start to get these greater and greater inequalities in the economy, you need to get people focused on something other than the conditions of their life. So now here you have a perfect example where, and by the way, Buddhism functions the same way. It focuses you on detachment. It focuses you in the distance between yourself and the actual conditions of your life. So, if you're in Mississippi, you get Christianity. If you're in Marin, you get Buddhism. But I think both of them represent a kind of fatalism in the culture and a retreat of any kind of impulse for self-governance and democracy. They both seem to me to be pretty a sign of depression and malaise in the culture.
Yes. I agree with you.
Oh, thank you, MK.
So you don't miss going to church? You do?
You didn't go to church?
I went to church, and I tell you, I memorized the books of the Bible. It saved my tail when I was in boarding school in the sacred studies class, because I've got a really good memory for weird things. and we got geraniums on Easter, and there were boys, and it was a cool thing. I liked Sunday school. It was great.
Well, I don't think there's any reason not to.
The social event.
Yeah, well, not to closely study the Bible because, the Bible is this extremely important text in the development of our culture. So
and in my teaching years, all 35 of them, we taught religion as history.
Yeah, and you need to know it. So, I think that. Well, I have a whole theory of this. The fact that Christianity and Judaism has become, out of vogue, say in like coastal California, is because those older religions draw us back into our own personal and family histories and the history of the civilization that we're in. And it's not a pretty history. There's some nice parts about it, but there's a lot of ugly things too. And so if you can just, do religious drag, you can just put on the clothes and, the incense of a new religion that doesn't refer to your own past. In a way, it's a kind of escapism, which is unfortunate because I think people should know what's in the Bible and all the crazy things, and there are good things in there too. It's genocidal. The Old Testament especially.
And Episcopalianism was just thought up so that Henry VIII could get divorced. He wouldn't have to keep killing his wives.
Yeah. Well, yes. Of course. It give him a divorce. Yes. I'll found my own church. Ha.
But a lot of like the development of what we think of as democracy and free thinking does come out of Martin Luther. Martin Luther is saying, don't listen to the priest, don't listen to the church. We would say the priesthood of all believers, which means your responsibility is to study the Bible for yourself. But so even though that's a religious thing, right, it is where a lot of our secular ideals come from. So.
I went to a very high Episcopal boarding school in New Hampshire, and I absolutely loved the music. I loved the ceremony and the incense swinging and the little boys in red robes at Christmas, and I love that aspect of it. And my middle daughter and I go to St. Mark's here in Seattle every Christmas to hear the voice choir.
Yeah, it's lovely. It
fills my soul with happiness, but it doesn't have anything to do with believing in anything except the fact that I love music.
Right. It's a wonderful spectacle designed to impress.
You were a chorister.
Why churches are always so, in Europe anyway, churches are huge, cathedrals are vast and pointing to God. And
if you go to Nova Scotia, there's these poor little towns, fishing towns, with cod smacks all over the place and drying fish and all the rest of these enormous churches.
Huh.
It's really interesting.
Really?
Yeah. It's a cool place. You should go there.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, plug for Nova Scotia.
Nova Scotia.
And I would just say there's the idea that, basically religion, I think the origin of religion, there are lots of different theories of this, but I think it's just the ritualization of our observation of how you survive. And
control.
Well, control, I think, comes later. I think it doesn't. Religion is about rules, and it's always been about rules. But the idea that, the opposite would be true, that you would want a society without rules is not a great one either. So it's a negotiation that we have to engage in.
That's true.
And state religion, religion is always rationalizing itself. So early Christianity emphasizes martyrdom because they were the outsiders. When they become the insiders, then this idea of martyrdom is a terrible idea. idea.
Forget that.
No more martyrdom, guys. We're in charge now, so nobody kill anybody. And the rules and the all brings to mind. How can you, without the morals that are taught to us by God's commandments, how can you have a moral code of your own, right? This is the argument that if you are an atheist, you have no moral code. Why would you say it puts us in the unfortunate position of trying to generate one? And this has always been the problem of
Well, you don't have to.
revolutions. Well, no, that you would need...
It's all written out.
Well, I mean...
Engraved in tablets.
But if you say we need to be, atheists or something like that. But, again, we're not going to be able to separate ourselves from the religious tradition out of which our present culture, so-called, arises. I think we need.
So those commandments were simply codifications of what people already did, right? You don't murder each other. You don't steal their ox. You don't lust after his wife. I mean, it's
those are all
living.
pretty good rules.
It's living in a community.
Do unto others.
Yeah, exactly. And how many are there of the commandments? 4, I think, that all have to do with blasphemy. Don't take his name in vain. All that stuff. But the rest of them are just rules that societies live by, right? And
I think, but based on experience, right? Based on the idea of trying to instill these particular cultural values.
You rely on each other to survive, and if you tick everybody off, then
you all get along.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, but I mean, I guess again,
simplistic, but
yeah.
Well, and again, the problem has become that I would say all of the sort of beneficial ideals of Christianity have kind of disappeared, and so we are, I would say, in an extremely ruthless society in some ways. Although the physical violence may be less, the idea of people as lonely individuals striving for their individual gain. This was something that the intention of a certain Christian faith was to check that idea of your own selfish gain being the highest ideal. Mm-hmm. So even though we've always been hypocritical, even though we've never lived up to the sort of ideals that were embodied by, say, Christianity, it did have some residual value. Mm-hmm. Even if people didn't believe it, so I guess I'd have to say,
right.
And I worry about a world that is completely unmoored from that. So as I say, I know people who are absolute believers in the Protestant ethic that have no idea that that's what they're doing or what the history of it is, and that it's in many ways an extreme ideology. So they have, in essence, the faith. They just don't know what it is, where it comes from. And so they think it's just the natural way of being is to be a ruthless self-promoter and grabbing stuff for yourself all the time.
Yeah, complete hypocrisy if you call yourself a Christian.
Yeah, and all sorts
especially these millionaire evangelists.
Oh, Joel Osteen, with saying you love Jesus because he'll make you rich.
Right.
I mean, isn't that a lovely human being? But then you also get that, like the Eastern side, Buddhism for business people. Actually, I saw that. I lived in New York City in the old Washington Irving High School over on, 18th near Gramercy Park. And they would have a really, actually, even though it's in southern Manhattan there, it's close to the project, so they had a terrible graduation rate during the day. It was really poor high school, even though it's a cool old building. But at night, they would have Buddhism for business. For business. And all of the rich people that would, didn't care whether the school was a good school or bad school by day, would flood in with their mats. And, there are feng shuis like that too, right? How do you angle your couch so you'll make money and have better sex? And, I don't know. So, I mean, I find that stuff to be pretty creepy.
Yeah.
Well, you guys carry on. I got to go out and yank out raspberries. They're taking over the world in my backyard.
Excellent.
Thank you so much, MK.
Thank you, MK.
Take good care.
Bye
Talk
now.
to you again sometime.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're listening to Let's Talk on KWMR 415-663-8492. We're talking about atheism.
Atheism, but
do you believe in these underwriters? Well, don't say.
KWMR is supported by Amanda Ross Skincare Salon in Uptown Bolinas, open Friday through Monday and by appointment, offering custom-designed facials, Swedish and deep tissue massage, reflexology, and waxing services, Amanda Ross skincare products, and more. Appointments available at 415-233-8736 or online at amandarossskincare.com. And KWMR is supported by the College of Marin, offering 62 associate degrees and 54 certificate programs to prepare for in-demand Bay Area careers, as well as new degrees for students wanting to transfer to a UC or to a state university. Financial aid and tutoring available. Summer classes start June 12th and fall classes start August 21st. Registration online at marin.edu. And KWMR wishes to express its gratitude and appreciation to all the volunteers who help our staff with office projects, special events, and other vital behind-the-scenes work. We thank you, volunteers, including our over 90 volunteer programmers, that would be.
Oh.
If you'd like to volunteer, please email amanda@kwmr.org or call 415-663-8068, extension 104. And if you'd like to call in and just express your opinions about atheism, what is its place in American society, let's just confine it to America for now. Give us a call, 415-663-8492. You can also tweet us at Let's Talk on KWMR. Richard Kirschman emailed, said, "Did you know the Boy Scouts of America will not accept atheists?"
Oh.
Recently, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the largest atheist organization in the U.S., began offering a merit badge in free thought to scouts who are non-believers. And Richard suggested the idea.
Oh.
Wonderful thing. Thank you, Richard. And we have another caller. Hi, caller. You are on the air. What's your name, please?
Hi, this is Mia.
Mia.
Hey.
Oh, we know you.
How are you doing?
Well.
Yeah.
Good. I thought it was an interesting topic. I just had a quick anecdote. When I went to India, and I went to Sufi dargahs, so like the Sufi compounds around a mosque, and every time they would ask me about my religion, I would say I'm agnostic, and they were not into that, so I started just saying I was Christian, and they were totally fine with that. So I just thought it was interesting that like the only time I ever pretended that I was Christian was within a Sufi dargah. So it was just always interesting and always the same reaction. They really didn't. They just were uncomfortable with a non-practicing religious person, but they were totally fine if it was a different religion. They were like, we don't care whatever it is, but we think it's weird that you don't do anything.
As long as you believe in a God.
Yeah, so I thought that was really interesting.
Well, yeah, but you said agnostic, which would allow for the belief in a God, but that wasn't good enough.
I told them that, and even that was, it was just like uncomfortable. So, yeah, so it was interesting. It was almost always the same reaction, very accepting of Christianity, but not comfortable with that ambiguity. So, yeah, that's all my own little anecdote.
Well, thank you, Mia.
Thank you, Mia.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Well, I mean, this is a kind of funny. I don't know if it's exactly related. When the British took over India, Paul, would you like to apologize?
Sorry.
They loved the Muslims to deal with them because they had one book. Because it's an Abrahamic religion, and they've just got the one book. And they couldn't stand the Hindus because they had all these different books. There was so much regional diversity in Hindu religious texts that the Bhagavad Gita that we have today was actually compiled by the British and disseminated at the end of the 18th century, in the late 1700s, which is, I mean, there's some irony to it, because they wanted people with one book. And so the modern Hinduism, as I imagine people have received it for hundreds of years now, is in a way, a British construction. They selected the stuff they wanted in there, and they made sure everybody had their version.
The codification of the deities and...
it's a fascinating piece of history. But but not entirely. But yeah, I mean, what's unknown is much more terrifying. So yeah, we know what Christians are. Okay, that's fine. But what, you're nothing? And kafir, right, means unbeliever.
Kafir.
And it means something else in South Africa, but we won't get into that.
Yeah, exactly. You have to believe in something. If you don't believe in God, then, that's, well, what would it be? It wouldn't even be heathen. Heathen means other gods or nothing or whatever. Atheism is anathema to a lot of people, and I think it's time that changed. So here's an article from thought.com. I think it is. How are atheists discriminated against? And sure enough, yes, atheists are discriminated against in the Boy Scouts.
Who's in the Boy Scouts? Are there Boy Scouts?
Both as members and as leaders. Boy Scouts of America asserts that atheists are incapable of being sufficiently moral or patriotic to deserve to be involved with scouting. Wow. And atheists are discriminated against in child custody cases.
That's interesting.
Again, because of lack of morals. It goes on and on. But we have a caller. Caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please?
Hi, this is Angela in Bolinas.
Hi.
Hello, Angela.
I'm a Buddhist. When I was younger, I would go to the church because it was beautiful, because I liked beautiful stuff. And what I do now is the Buddhism of Nichiren Daishonin, and I practice in the morning, and I do a prayer that's soothing and balancing, because if I'm not healthy, other people will be affected by that. It radiates through the atmosphere and your environment what you feel. So it's more like a philosophy of doing a prayer in the morning to balance yourself, and in the evening we chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and it's more of a philosophy.
More of a philosophy than a religion?
Well, what do you think of atheism?
Which means, what would you say is atheism is?
I would say not believing in a God.
Right, and that's what Buddhism is like. We are bringing out our God nature, which is our best, highest life condition.
The God within.
Yes.
Exactly. And so these are wonderful morning and evening rituals. I think more people need those instead of just slumping down in front of the TV with a martini.
You've got to take action. And there is a website, sgi.org.
SGI? Yeah.
Yep, sgi.org. And we practice now. It started in San Francisco from Japan, and it came from India. Shakyamuni Buddha brought the Lotus Sutra out, and after writing all these other sutras, teachings, and then President Daisaku Ikeda came over in 1960 to San Francisco, where he had many people to teach Nam Myoho Renge Kyo to bring out your highest life condition, and then it manifests in the environment, the Buddha land.
What do you say to my point earlier, Angelo, that was that the importance of Christianity, which has many meditative disciplines within it, hundreds of them, is in part that it links us with our own past so that we don't forget what came before. And that for somebody like me, born in the United States of European heritage, Buddhism in a way would, and maybe I suggest people do this deliberately or consciously or unconsciously, this is one of the effects that it has, is it separates you from your past. It isn't about the story of who you are and where you came from. Is that problematic at all to you? Or?
Well, it's more like we want to change the future. We can only change the present and the future, but we can learn from the past. We don't leave it out. We can change what we're doing now from our actions, and our karma is what we make from our actions, our thoughts and our words and our actions. So everything comes forth through you. You're like a channeling everything to make the best thing come possible from your life for others. It's altruism in a way for the world. for world peace. Because as I was starting to say, we went to San Francisco first. The Soka Gakkai went to San Francisco first, and now there's 192 countries and territories around the world practicing. And the idea is that the better its cause and effect, the more thoughts and words and actions and helping ourselves to help others become happy, then others can become enlightened. And that way, let me start again with the question, what you had. Because it's like sort of manifesting Buddhahood throughout all 4 or all 10 directions, and bringing out Buddhahood for everyone to benefit from this good energy. And so I think you were talking about the past. Okay, the reason I started chanting really is I had a lot of health karma, and then I was brought up in Marin County. I went to Tamalpais High School, but I'm multicultural, and I've got Irish, British, African, Haitian, Choctaw, Cherokee. And I feel like I'm changing my karmic history of all those ancestors through bringing out the best I can through me, and helping my elders and helping the young people as much as I can by just doing this morning and evening prayer and visualizing peace. It helps.
Well, thank you. That was lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good day.
Bye now.
This is Let's Talk on KWMR 415-663-8492. The topic is atheism.
And as you said, the religions, all religions have lots of meditative exercises to them. Supposedly, you would think that it's to bring about the same kind of thing that the Buddhist rituals that Angela uses to promote well-being, and thereby promoting better connection with others and promoting well-being in them, and going towards peace. But this has not been the case in.
Well, look, I mean, they're all there. I mean, the second most important text in, say, Orthodox Christianity is called The Ladder of Divine Ascent by John Climacus. And, I mean, it's just it's a series of meditative practices. I think there are 33 of them or something like that involving prayer. I think they do involve things like diet as well. And it's all there. I mean, why I suggest that it is out of vogue is because we're haunted by our past.
We're haunted by our past. I meant to ask Angela if she would vote for an atheist. It's kind of a question.
The way I would, this way I classically put it is that in the old, in say Judaism, there's a power god, and you worship the power god, and he's nice to you. In Christianity, it is goofy. God is a loser. God does not win. He loses in spectacular fashion. Pathetic. And I would say my issue with things like Buddhism is that you are the power god. Yeah. And that to me is very scary.
Well,
I think it produces scary pathologies.
The power within.
Yeah. I find it slightly terrifying.
I think that's all right. And caller, you are on the air now. What's your name, please?
Vincent Pizzuto. I'm at St. Columbus in Inverness.
Hey, Vincent! Wonderful.
How you doing?
Just fine. Actually, I spoke with Vincent outside the Dance Palace some weeks ago, but it's great to hear your voice again.
Yeah, thanks for the show. It's been fun to listen to.
Well, you're a professional. We have to defer to your
expertise.
Indeed. So what's your comment then?
So just a few things. I mean, as you're talking about the question of mysticism, or the question of sort of providing spiritual practices in various religions, it's my experience that if you look back to the way in which in the United States Buddhism and even Hinduism, Vedanta tradition and so forth, became so prominent, it really has to do with looking back to the 60s, when in fact I think a lot of Christians were already being, marginalized from their traditions for a host of reasons. And most importantly, I think what a lot of the gurus and sort of the thinkers that came over and brought these Eastern traditions were about was providing a method of prayer, a method of meditation that while certainly is in Christianity, was not being brought forward by the churches. You mentioned the ladder of divine ascent, but you also have, just tons of mystical literature, John of the Cross, Therese of Lisieux, and the Philokalia, for example, in the Eastern Church, that provide these methods. But this is not what the Christian in the pew of either Catholic or Protestant churches in the United States were hearing. So this sort of exotic import of, methods of prayer became very appealing to people who were searching for something deeper that I think Christianity of the 50s simply wasn't providing.
Well, there's another perspective on that quickly, Reverend, that was... Adam Curtis did a wonderful blog on the origins of yoga, and he traces it, or the popularity of yoga in the West, I should say, and he traces it back to the so-called physical culture of the late 19th century in England and then in Germany, which was about this usually upper middle class rejection of the of degenerate city life, and so it focused on being physically spectacular and eating well and all of this stuff, and then the Nazis pick it up in a big way in the 30s, and I think of all those Leni Riefenstahl films, which are really odd. And when you come back to, again, that disaffection with the city and with the general direction of the civilization that's picked up in the 50s and 60s in the West, it really looks a lot like what was called physical culture, except for because it was discredited so by the Nazis, the idea that you could find another apparent basis for a very similar perspective on what's happening to civilization was had a lot of purchase. It obtained because it's like back to the land. It was just like the upper classes who hated the factory workers and things like that in the 1880s and 1890s. Now it's the upper classes who, for whatever reason, feel disaffected with the politics or the society they're in. They want to escape, and where do they come? Well, Marin. But anyway, you were talking, Reverend. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's not an interruption at all. That was really my comment. I do think that there is a certain exoticism around those practices, at least initially. Now they're becoming much better established as really, noble traditions in their own right. But I think, when you look at how many folks who were really, younger people at the time, this was during the Summer of Love and all of those transformations going on in society, and a lot of it centering around the West Coast here, you really can see what that draw would have been and how it speaks to a certain disaffection that people already were feeling, even though the churches hadn't yet really seen the sharp decline that followed in the decades after.
Well, I was interested in, you said that 1950s Christianity churches were not supplying the needs of people so much. What has changed since then?
Well, in many cases, not much. A few things have changed in that, if you do look at the overall sort of church attendance, we're still seeing, by and large, declines. There are some dips that are going up. But I think, in other words, that people are still not finding what they would be hungering for in a faith community, which is something that really taps into this deeper spiritual attraction to beauty and to awe and to a sense of connection. Look, on many levels, if you don't have baggage around it, it's not your tradition. It's kind of like a family. So it's not surprising that traditions from Asia and from the East in general would find sort of an open field of people, because we were somewhat naive about what baggage Asians would have had around their own traditions and the corruption that they saw within their systems and so forth. So it was somewhat of an open field and a romantic one at that. But I think, you talked earlier about the idea of the new atheism, and I do think there is something that we could rightly call the new atheism, because I think we're at a point in history where what is behind, or what is the catalyst that's fueling a lot of atheism, particularly in Western society, is precisely because churches, particularly I think Christianity, probably Judaism as well, have not provided people who are far more intelligent and educated and worldly now than they would have been in earlier centuries, have not provided people with adequate theologies. We're still, in essence, talking about an old man with a beard in the sky. And so atheism, the new atheism, becomes what one theologian calls a purifying corrective to really bad theology, to really inadequate theologies. It isn't just that we're not meditating right, or we have bad sermons, or the music is terrible. We're not informing people who are understanding what it means to live ever more so, for example, in an evolutionary universe, or the sense of connection that we now understand with the whole rest of the created order. I mean, we're living in a time where people who are much more in touch with those things. The churches aren't providing a way to think through God theories that incorporate some way of making that make sense or viable or worth, if you want to say, buying into, to put it crudely.
No, the Episcopal Church certainly, and a lot of the sort of high Protestant denominations in the United States did become slightly radical in the 60s in terms of offering spaces for the Black Panthers to meet and fostering those kinds of things. It seems to me that there's the problem is an absence of hope in the culture, which, as I say, comes from things like nuclear paranoia. It comes from the hangover from the Cold War that, people from my generation they have it without knowing it. They have nuclear paranoia sort of built into the culture they're born into without even being able to trace it back to its source, which is, again, I'd say the danger of, and I'd say it's anti-Enlightenment quality of going to Eastern religion, because you're deliberately remystifying the world. Things that shouldn't be mysterious, you make them mysterious again.
Well, and I mean, isn't it true, though, that like, for example, when we look at what in terms of human history, are very recent discoveries of the expansiveness of the universe, which is, incomprehensible, far more so than any of the ancients would have even ever imagined. Isn't it true, then, that on some level, our scientists are leading us to almost a newer and deeper kind of mystery that should become not a threat to religious faith, but actually an opening up of conversation with just how incomprehensible in vastness, size, beauty, extravagance this thing called the universe is. So to me, in some ways, I am moved to a certain religious awe by reading scientific journals about, black holes or the size of the galaxies that are closest to us and so forth. This to me is awe-inspiring, and I think even scientists would agree. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with the works of Richard Dawkins, and he and I have a lot in common in that I understand that his concern with Christianity, particularly with creationism in Christianity, is in his words, it gives the impression that God just done it, and by doing so extracts the profound beauty that he has discovered, I think rightly, in Big Bang and evolutionary theory, which too many Christians who are sort of retreating from the grayness of the world that it's become, and out of a fear-based need to cling to something that gives them a black or white answer, and hence you have your biblical fundamentalism and so forth. In retreating from that, Dawkins' concern is that we're missing the beauty of what science is now opening up to us by sort of accepting the literalism of a primitive text that had nothing to do with what science is trying to do.
Yeah, literalism is the key to it, right?
Don't we have an excess of the sublime, though, here? Isn't that a problem? One, the sublime does not imply, it has no moral content. It is just this feeling of awe and terror at things like the extreme beauty of nature. But it does have this effect of wiping out memory. It does have this effect of separating ourselves from a foreground or a background. It leaves us in this really weirdly Nazi spiritualism.
Can't you just live in a beautiful place and just go about your business? Why does it have to have any effect other than just making you feel good when you wake up in the morning and look out the window?
There's an element to me that seems
has
very dangerous.
some kind of moral effect on it, or immoral effect on it?
I think it has the effect of wiping out memory, and to me that's toxic. But what do you think? We have a professional on the line.
Well, not really. I mean, look, I think what I'm hearing you say brings me to the question of then what is the catalyst for acting ethically? Is it a carrot and stick mentality? Is it, in other words, heaven and hell? Is it about we'll be punished? Is it about trying to make ourselves worthy before a thunderbolt slaying God? Or is it about beauty? I mean, and to me, it isn't this. It isn't fear that is as at the heart of religion. It's awe and beauty that compels us toward the good. And it's precisely when we are in touch with the beauty. I forgot who said we only mourn what we know. And the fact is that, our society, by and large, and we may be a small bubble in which we have the privilege of at least having that tempered, our society suffers from the malady of disconnect. I mean, we are so disconnected from each other. We are so disconnected from the land and the beauty of it that we don't think twice about trashing it, and which is what we're doing globally. So I think that what the religious impulse is about is connecting with that beauty, and out of that, to me, is what my experience has been arises ethics.
Well, isn't this a problem of, but again, a problem of not being able to deal with the problem of suffering, right? Because the idea of the Christian ethic is the free selection of the other, right? The Good Samaritan, selecting the person to whom you will feel empathy, to you be empathetic. But that means dealing with people's sorrow and pain. And we seem to have such an excess of jouissance and happiness and beauty out here. And I don't see people being able to deal with the suffering of the other. That we shun it. We're afraid of it.
Oh, yes, and there may be some, there may be, to your point, a bit of an insularity around that. But wait till the next big one hits.
Yeah. Then we'll all be I always say this: people make up with their wives and spouse. Everybody get together. And,
of course, but there's something to be said from that, because in and through that suffering, there was a rabbi who, after 9/11 in New York, would actually chant the transcripts of the phone messages and the last texts and so forth that were sent out from the people who knew they were dying or going to die, and he said he chants this as if it were sacred scripture, because in fact it is, because it cuts through all of the the junk we get caught up in day to day, and what gets expressed is the deepest truth of the love of your family and friends and so forth. So in a sense, you're correct. I think that we could be insulated a bit, but this is where we have to, in a sense, like everything else, understand that privilege as a place of not where we can simply indulge ourselves, but as a place where we are now going to be held accountable, I think, to one another, to take what we know here, how we experience this beauty, and to understand how that message needs to be transmitted to those who are not as fortunate to be as in touch with it as we are.
I mean, I think that there's a reason why we have to wrap it up, but there's a reason why that so many of these religions focus on suffering. There's a reason for that crucifix, which on the wall, and the contemplation.
Can I make a final point to that?
Yeah, and plug St. Columba's.
Well, one of my favorite things is to talk about is when people ask about where is God in the midst of suffering. One of the basic theologies of Christianity is that God is not emperor of the universe. God is Christ crucified. And then where is God but in the midst of suffering? Because as you say, this is where what gets revealed is what's most authentic in all of us.
And St. Columba's, a plug?
A plug for St. Columba's. On the 31st at 7 o'clock, I'm doing my next talk on my fireside chat, and it will be on politics and the gospel then and now. And then I have one coming up in August on agnostics, atheism, and mysticism. So I hope to see you guys there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Reverend.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Well, this has been Let's Talk Call-In Radio, and thank you to everyone who called in today. Fabulous. KWMR does not take a stand on any of the issues discussed on Let's Talk. Opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts and callers and don't necessarily reflect the views of KWMR, its board of directors, underwriters, or members. This was fun. We have to do this one again, I think. I think there's more to be said about religion and atheism, as always.
Well, thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Charles. So thanks, everybody.